This podcast is a production of the Brickyard Network, an extension of the Archie Bray Foundation for the Ceramic Arts. To find out more about our lineup of ceramic podcasts, visit brickyardnetwork.org.
Hey, this is Erin with Cornell Studio Supply located in Dayton, Ohio, exclusive distributor of Jen Allen templates and Put a Lid on It t-shirts. We are a proud sponsor of this episode and the Brickyard Network. Find all your pottery and ceramic sculpture needs, including the largest stock of GR pottery forms at cornellstudiosupply.com. At Cornell Studio Supply, we are owned and operated for potters, by potters.
Welcome to the Tales of a Red Clay Rambler podcast, featuring interviews with culture makers from around the world. This is Ben Carter. I'm going to be your host. If you'd like more information on the show, please visit our website, talesofaredclayrambler.com. Welcome back to episode 521 of the podcast. Thank you all for tuning in. Today on the show, I'm talking with Christi Ruffin. She is an avid collector of ceramics, and by that I mean she is completely obsessed with clay. I recently got to visit her Charlotte, North Carolina home and hold many of the pieces that make up her collection of over 3,000 pots. In this interview, we talk about the forming of relationships with artists, ensuring and documenting a ceramic collection, and how the pandemic helped accelerate her collecting habit. To see her collection, you can follow Christi on Instagram at pottery.addict. Also wanted to mention that we are getting ready to take a short summer hiatus at the Brickyard Network, and then we're going to be back in the fall with new shows from Trade Secret, For Fleck's Sake, and of course this show. There are lots and lots of episodes of our Brickyard Network shows that are available now on your favorite podcast apps, so make sure to look back in the feed and listen to the ones you haven't listened to before. If you'd like more information about the network, you can go to brickyardnetwork.org. Without further ado, we'll get to the interview. So how did you start collecting? What was your original connection to clay?
I just always went to art shows and art fairs with my mom and my grandparents growing up. And I guess kind of as I was coming out of college was when I got some of my first clay pieces. And it was just through an art fair. And I was always drawn to like Kandinsky and pottery or photography of Ansel Adams and that kind of work. But it was after college that I kind of started transitioning to 3D work that I wanted to actually decorate my house with now that I had my own place. And so it was just right after college that I started really collecting pots. And then that quickly moved into functional work as well, because I wanted to be able to use it every day instead of having, a store-bought set of dishes. I transitioned into having more pieces that were handmade by somebody so that I could use on everyday basis.
You mentioned that you're in the greater Charlotte area. What are the hot spots in Charlotte to buy pots in person?
We used to have a good bit of galleries in Charlotte, and they've all mostly closed. So there's really not a ton left in the Charlotte area. There's the Potter's Market at the Mint, which happens once a year. That has always been a big draw for me. And it introduced me to a lot of just North Carolina potters because back in the day, it was an invitational. So it was only kind of the best of North Carolina. And new leadership has taken over in the past several years. And so it's a juried show now. So it's a little bit different, but still great work. It just has a different vibe than it used to have. But anyway, at the PMI show, it was always on my calendar. Every year I would go, and just being able to see some of the same makers over and over again. Have forged relationships with those individuals too, ended up on their mailing lists, would find out about kiln openings and other shows. And then I would just start kind of planning travel and vacations and things like that around a pottery show, unbeknownst to many of the people that were traveling with me. I was like, oh, by the way, here's a show.
See, that's when you know you're hooked, when all the vacation plans start going towards pottery destinations.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like Charlotte, or at least that Piedmont area, you're in a sweet spot in that you can go to the mountains, and that's a totally different sort of group of makers, or you can go towards Seagrove. You can kind of go more that way. I mean, North Carolina is one of the best states for making, and by default would also, I would imagine, be one of the best for collecting.
Yeah, it really has been a treat. Seagrove, and there used to be a large pottery show in Sanford, North Carolina too, which is out towards that side of the state. So my mom and I would travel out there. It would be like similar to what you said, Mark talked about. It would be within an hour and a half's drive. So it was easy to access, and it pulled a lot of different makers and different styles all together. So you had a good opportunity of different work to purchase if you wanted, and were interested in it. So Seagrove actually was kind of the start for me. And going to the celebration of Seagrove Potters, and they have a great, the SAPA community that organizes events around the Seagrove area. And I think what's also interesting about Seagrove is you've got generational potters there that have had family doing the work for decades. And then you've also got a big chunk of people that have moved to the area because it is such a fruitful clay community, but they bring a very different vibe and style. So it's not your typical North Carolina traditional pottery, but you've got, Johnston and Gentithes and Bulldog, who have brought knowledge from other educational backgrounds as opposed to traditional family historical backgrounds. So it's a pretty cool area. And Penland, I mean, up in the mountains is a whole different kind of situation, but similar, where you've got some tradition, but it's mostly people who have studied ceramics and pottery making, and don't necessarily have that North Carolina traditional work vibe, but a lot of different variety there.
Yeah, I think as potters, we often talk about tradition a lot. Like that's important in the maker lineages, especially in the apprentice and master relationship or teacher relationship, how that develops over time. But as a collector, how do you feel about tradition? Like, do you think that's important to you as someone who's buying the work?
It has been. I mean, I've had a great opportunity because Hewitt is in the area, and Joseph Sand and Daniel Johnston and those people have continued kind of that, having apprentices and having other people make some of the work. So it's a loaded question, because in some cases they're making other people's work, but they're learning the technique and the practice and building the skill set to then develop their own voice after the fact. So I love watching how that transitions out. So once they've spent the time and done the year or 2 years or however long the apprenticeship looks, and made Mark's work or Daniel's work, but then take those techniques and the skill set and really turn it into their own voice is pretty exciting to watch. So I don't know that I really answered your question, but I do love watching people's journey through really refining the ability and then figuring out their own voice and where that's going to take them to.
Yeah, and it sounds like the part you're interested in is when tradition's a springboard, less than when it's boundaries.
Yes, yeah, for sure. That's a great way to put it. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I think about that a lot because when I was living and working in China, I would go to Jingdezhen, which is, porcelain, the porcelain capital. And their approach to tradition, it was shocking to me. Like, in one hand, they obviously were working within some traditional materials and traditional blue and white ways of making. But I didn't find that sort of reverence for tradition that we have in the States. And I wondered if it's because they actually have long spans of ceramic history, so they don't really need to keep focusing on it. It's like it's kind of the ground you walk on, whether you notice it or not. As to where in the US, I think we focus on tradition because we're trying to cement our place in a bigger history that we're loosely a part of in terms of chronological history.
Yeah, it's interesting. I also admit I don't know a lot about outside of US ceramics and pottery. I appreciate like some of the work in the UK and of course what you just described with the porcelain work in China and but I have very little knowledge from that aspect of the ceramics world, which something I would like to learn more about, but I also know that I have so much to do here and in the States too. But anyway.
Well, yeah, let's talk about how your interest has guided you. Because I think when you're in the moment, I would imagine you're just kind of following your passion. So you buy the pots that are the most interesting. But in hindsight, you can probably see there's some connective tissue between the work that you like. So how do you think things are connected, or has your style developed over time?
Oh, yeah. Style has definitely shifted a good bit. When I first started collecting, like I would never buy work that had pictures of things on it. So illustrative, it was all about the glaze and the form and the colors and an atmospheric surface, something like that. And if you would have told me 20 years ago that I was going to have a huge collection of birds on pot, I never would have believed it. But as I've learned more about the different techniques and the different approaches that people take to decorating clay, I have absolutely fallen in love with illustrative surfaces. And I mean, honestly, there's not much I don't like. I don't love gold luster. But aside from that, I just am enamored at how wildly different the pieces can be and how creative individuals are in dreaming up making mud or clay, porcelain, dirt, whatever, into these magical things that either enrich a daily ritual or, are just something beautiful that we get to admire on a daily basis to make our homes feel more alive and comfortable. So my style is all over the board now. And it's broadened to be more open to almost everything.
I have the value of being able to see behind you and to see there's a lot of pots behind you. The listener can't see those, but as I was trying to make connections between all of these, I don't know if I can make a connection. Like I can see that the style is really broad, but I see things that look really contemporary, like a beautiful Chris Pickett vase, that thing that almost looks like a spaceship. And then I've seen pictures of yours like Daniel Johnston jars, which are, that's a traditional form, traditional glaze. Like there's such a broad spectrum there. I would imagine some of this is determined on if you're buying from the person in person or if you're buying like online. So how are you sourcing pots beyond the craft show we talked about that's connected to the Mint?
That shifted a good bit as well. I think the onset of Instagram and being able to completely break wide open availability of work and find makers that are absolutely not in my region definitely changed the way I was buying. And I have absolutely embraced the online marketplace, much to my pocketbook's demise. But so I always will prefer to buy in person because to me, a lot of it is about the personal connection and hearing about the inspiration. And I'm a sucker for a good story, and hearing about the process and the pain of getting it to work the way they wanted and whether or not it was what they intended it to be. I just always love hearing about all of that. But then an online purchase is really easy for me too. The photos are really important. I have learned pretty quickly who edits or alters way too much, and what I end up getting in the mail is completely different than I expected. From an online perspective, it is definitely more the form and what it looks like the finish might be when I get it here in person. I definitely have embraced both. And then we got into this really weird place where, it became like this crazy, like smash and grab sale kind of online for some people in the market that are highly sought after and difficult to purchase, or they don't make a ton of work. And so the sale drops ended up being like you needed to have all the tricks and all the things in place so that you were signed in beforehand and refreshing so that you could check out immediately. And that, there's a rush of getting what you wanted because you saw a preview of it online, which I think is really important from a marketing perspective for people to prepare for a sale, so that the buyer has a good idea of what's going to be available. But when we don't know what's going to be available, and it is like 100 pots go live and you're just like, I want a picture, and you're trying to click buy now, that can be a really frustrating purchasing experience, but I got really good at it. So I also would lend those services to other people who maybe didn't even have the time or the flexibility to log on at that point, or didn't have an account set up or whatever. But that type of buying experience is definitely, aside from the rush of getting it, is not super fulfilling. I would much rather buy in person.
It sounds like you have some funny stories about that. Have you had any times in which that one got away? Because I remember pots that have gotten away from me that I didn't buy. They're like burnt into my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been really fortunate in terms of getting really fast. It took me a while to figure out Sarah Pike's sales, but I have been way too successful at being able to purchase her work, almost to the point where I feel.
What's the secret? Because I have never been able to purchase her work.
Oh no!
Yeah, I've tried. I know her. I've tried for years, and I just can't get it.
I've actually purchased for a couple people from her, and a lot for myself. Honestly, it's just having your account set up, logging in ahead of time, and now that she'll do a preview, you can kind of see what you're looking for and just scan really fast. So, it's tough though.
How do you budget, or do you budget? I know it's hard to think about a year, but like over the course of a year, do you say like, oh, this sale's coming up in the spring, so I'm going to spend more? Or do you do like a little bit each month? How do you budget it?
It's definitely changed as thankfully as I've progressed through my work career, and money is different than, I have more disposable income, fortunately, than earlier in my collecting career, where it was like, okay, I have this one sale and I can buy one thing, and that's about it. So, and now I think because my collecting habit is more about finding the right pot, I just need to be able to make the room in my budget if it comes along. So, and especially because at this point I have so much stuff. I'm out of room. I really should stop. If I had developed some of the habits that some other collectors do, which is cycle through their collection and actually sell things, I would be in better shape, I think. But I just have a hard time reselling. haven't been able to figure that out. I don't know. I should. There's probably for sure pots from early in my collecting that don't speak to me anymore. But there's also pots from earlier on of people that I continue to collect. And I love being able to see that progression of work too. So circling back to your question of budgeting, like I recently went to St. Croix and people asked like, what's your budget for today? I did not come to St. Croix with the budget. It's my first time at St. Croix. I'm going to buy what speaks to me. I have, my list of 4 or 5 things that I definitely want. And if I see them, I'm getting them, period. And I'll figure it out. And then, going from there. But I do, just time and space wise, need to be realistic and not just buy anything and everything. And I can't buy anything and everything. So I love offering up buying services to other people. So if I have had the opportunity to develop some really cool relationships with other collectors. And so if we know that we're going to be in person at a sale and somebody else can't be there, we'll get a wish list from people and, try and help people buy pots that way. So I love spending other people's money. It's been fantastic. And then there's some wish list pieces that if it happens to come across in the secondary market that, from somebody that's not making anymore and it becomes available, then I'll try and figure that out too. So, but I also was raised by very pragmatic people in terms of living within your means, and I'm not going into debt for ceramics. My grandparents bought their house with cash. Like we don't live on credit. So I also have that kind of background of, I know I could very easily, dangerously go over the edge of overspending on ceramics, but it's not in my DNA to do that.
So even though your name is Pottery Addict on Instagram, you actually have a lot of self-control.
It depends who you talk to of whether or not I have self-control. My dad, before he passed away, one of the things that he wanted me to do for Christmas, I did do for Christmas. He offered me X number of dollars to spend solely on pots as long as I didn't spend any of my own money on it for 1 year.
Wow.
And I agreed to it. It was painful. So painful. So I did not do that again. And he tried to get me to do it again a second year, but I just wouldn't. He's like, Christi, you don't need to help these people pay their rent. And I'm like, yeah, but it's kind of cool that I can because I love the pots and I want the work and I get to use it on a daily basis. And if it helps somebody else out, then that's a win-win.
Well, this is one of the things that people that aren't collectors in general, like they don't have the collecting gene, they just can't understand. It's like why would you keep buying work from the same person? Because I think they think about it. I actually don't. I'm a collector, so I don't know how they think about it. But it seems very different than the way I think about it, which is that I want this thing. Like it's just totally about my desire for that object. It's not rational. It has no connection to reality. It's just that I want that.
Yeah. Yeah. I try to be rational and be like, okay, well, I already have a your by them, so I don't need another your by them. And then it's like, oh, but it's different. Like it's iterated and look at the form is this or that. And then I'll rationalize why I can have a second one from them of the same form. But I think you either have that kind of mindset and collecting gene, if you will, of it's a visceral kind of need, or you just don't understand why you want another mug. You have mugs.
I had this funny thing with Matt Metz, so I know you have some of Matt's pots. In fact, I think you got some pretty sweet ones at St. Croix this year.
Yeah.
But I've bought almost exactly the same pot from him twice. It was this little bird bowl, and I was like, man, I love that bowl. And I bought it, got it home, and realized I already had one almost exactly the same. So there's something about like that personal relationship you get with someone's aesthetic that I think is unique to collecting. So with someone like Matt, like I think you have some of his work, can you talk about like what you're looking for from an artist like him that's established? He's had multiple bodies of work over a long amount of time.
I mean, at that point, all the pots are good, but there's always going to be a handful that just have that kind of special thing. And I think it's kind of hard to put that to, verbalize what that is. It just has a different feel, a little bit of different life to it. Or there's something either in the form or as with Matt's, with the illustration that's in the surface that you connect to in a different way. So I really don't know how to verbalize it, but it is more kind of about a connection and like a gut desire to have the piece.
When you're buying for other people, you mentioned that you do that with some of your friends that are collectors. How did y'all start doing that? Because that's a really smart idea.
I don't know how we started doing that. Well, actually, I think one of the ways it started was actually not another collector. Well, he does collect, but he's a maker as well. So Mark Arnold was in the Pittsburgh area and was going to be at one of the local shows in Pittsburgh where Joseph Delphia had work. And I just made a comment on somebody's post that, gosh, Joe's work is on my wish list. And Mark just reached out and was like, I'm going to be there. If you want me to buy something for you, just let me know and I'll send you some pictures and we can pick it out and I'll work it out with you. I had never met Mark. Like we just knew each other virtually through Instagram. And here's this guy buying a pot for me 5 states away and then offering to ship it to me. And I mean, that honestly was probably the first time that somebody offered to virtually shop for me. And then it was just such a great feel good thing for me because it was a wish list. It was some stranger that now I'm great friends with. And it was just pretty cool to be able to still support another artist and somebody who wasn't really selling online a lot. So there wasn't an opportunity for me to purchase it remotely. And it was a cool opportunity. So that I think kind of sparked the idea of, well, I can do this for other people too, especially because I did have such great access to local work in person and lots of pottery shows and pottery events that I could go to and buy for. So, and the larger my collection grew, the less I really could continue to buy as many pots for myself as I had, but I still wanted to support the artists. So for me, a lot of the Instagram posting and things that I do is, solely because I really want to see people be successful doing the thing that they love when they're, a quality human and make amazing work. And I know it's quality work that I can feel comfortable I don't know that I'm, recommending it, but definitely putting my stamp of approval on it almost if I'm posting about it. But, so being able to continue to support people in that way and help somebody else get a piece of work that they've been dying for, that they're really looking to add to their collection just is a cool opportunity. So it's been fun to do.
We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by the Rosenfield Collection of Functional Ceramic Art. The collection exists as an online resource for research and inspiration, featuring photos of over 4,000 objects made by over 1,000 artists. The images are high quality and can be used with no permission required, making them a great resource for students and teachers. To find out more, visit rosenfieldcollection.com.
The Bray Clay business is your best source for Bray epoxy, a 2-part moldable epoxy intended for post-firing repairs. Working like clay, it's easy to shape, texture, fill gaps, and recreate missing parts. Bray epoxy is sold in tan, white, and black base colors, and we also have a 9-color kit that will allow you to perfectly disguise your repair. Order online anytime at archiebrayclay.com.
And one of the things I like about your Instagram is that you're adding your personal narrative to other people's work, which I like that. Like following the trip you took to St. Croix, like I could feel the excitement through you, which was great because I couldn't go to St. Croix. So I was like living vicariously through you posting about this buying experience. I think that's unique. Like that you're giving your perspective is a really nice thing.
Oh, thanks for that. I do enjoy it. My friends and family who appreciate clay, but gets kind of tired of hearing about it. That's kind of why I started posting, because I do have a lot to say about it. And so it was nice to be able to have somewhere, a community to share that enthusiasm and excitement and help other people learn about different artists that they may not have stumbled across on their own, and just kind of share that work. So I enjoy spending the time making the posts.
Well, I have some practical questions, which feel free, if these are boring, we can skip them.
Okay.
But you have enough pots that I would imagine insurance, that you have to insure them, or at least insure your house, which holds them. So how do you handle home insurance when you have multiple pieces in a collection?
I probably need to revisit that. I did start taking an inventory for insurance purposes, and at one point had a relationship with somebody that was a computer coder. And so we kind of built out a website where I was cataloging and inventorying everything. And that got a little daunting to see how much I had invested in, and to see what the real count of items is. All that to say, I have thought it through. I have cataloged things. I have put values against the things that most everything that I have out there in the catalog, and have kind of a rider on the insurance for personal property. But I probably need to revisit that because it's been a few years, and 2020 definitely blew this collection out of water. I bought a lot of pots in 2020.
Was that retail therapy? You're making yourself feel better?
It's interesting. It was definitely retail therapy. I was, confined to my house. My dad was ill, so I was definitely not taking chances in going out and seeing friends, and spent a lot of time with my parents at that point. So definitely a lot of retail therapy. But I wasn't paying for gas and parking uptown. I wasn't paying to have my hair dyed. I wasn't paying to do a lot, all my concert money, like that was all kind of shelved. So I had all of my typical disposable income was available, and I was more than happy to invest it in the ceramics community. So, because it was scary, like that was a really scary time. Like, I fortunately work for a big corporation, so I felt pretty comfortable that I was going to stay employed and I wasn't going to take a big hit during the pandemic. But I was really concerned for my friends and the people that I've purchased from that rely on, craft fairs and different. I mean, for many people, purchasing ceramics is a luxury. It's not a need. So that line of business, and I mean, any of the handmade kind of things, it was a scary time. So I was happy to reinvest the money that I would have been spending on my own personal expenses back into people that I cared about, that were still making work that was something that I could incorporate into my home.
I would love to see an economist actually do a study on that, like how people reshifted the way they spent money during the pandemic. Because the thing we found, my wife and I definitely bought a ton of pots during the pandemic, but because we didn't eat out, all of a sudden we had way more money to do all sorts of different things.
Yeah.
We also had our daughter, so we've never gone back to eating out in the same way we did before. And if you would have asked me 5 years ago, I'd have said, oh yeah, eating out is really important. It's a social activity, like it's a point of connection. And now I'm like, oh yeah, we never do that.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how those shifts happen in the lives of people during a major event like that.
Yeah, for sure.
So can you talk about the amount of objects you think you have, if you're comfortable sharing?
Well, I did kind of pull up the website, the database that we were building and working through. So I had not updated any of the inventory since 2021. But at that point, I was just shy of 2,000 pieces.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Nice.
It's a lot. It's a lot. And then if I add drinking vessels all together, so mugs, goblets, and cups, close to 1,000.
Wow.
It's insane. That
is awesome though, because this is verging on obsession, which I really appreciate.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, self-admitted. Pottery Addict is like, it's tongue in cheek, but I'm not kidding myself. I know that it is on the verge of a problem, but I will take that over drug use or whatever else I could be addicted to.
Of all the addictions you could have, buying pots is like A-okay. Yeah. I know, and we don't have to talk about specifics, but I know there's probably pots in your collection that are worth a lot from an insurance perspective. Like, let's say some of the older potters, Michael Simon, Ron Myers, like all those guys are so collectible that their objects end up being numerically really important. But that doesn't necessarily mean it has the same emotional connection that you might have to a pot that's cheap. It might be like a $40 mug you bought 10 years ago, but it was the right pot at the right time. So how do you think about like emotional value versus financial value within the bigger collection as a whole?
That's a good question. And the way I purchase has definitely changed, because early on in the collecting, I couldn't afford some of those bigger investment pieces and didn't. But for me, it still is about the gut. I don't have a Michael Simon piece in my collection. Surprised I don't, because I do love those Persian boxes, but I don't know. I can't see that investment at this point. I'm sure maybe at some point I will, if the right piece comes along and it speaks to me, but that's not to say I haven't dropped a pretty penny on some pots, because I have. But it is, for me, the higher the price tag, the more it needs to be a love. Like, I need that, as opposed to, oh, that's very prestigious, I have to buy it. For me, it is real. It's still about the gut feel and the love of whether or not I will spend that kind of money on a piece.
Michael Simon is an interesting one. I did an interview with him years ago, and it was a really formative experience talking to someone who had stopped making, because even at that point, I can't remember when I talked to him, 2014 maybe, the pots were expensive. It was definitely the most expensive pots, American pots, of anyone that I had known. But since then, when he passed away, like the prices of those now, they're really verging more on commodities as a commodity. Like things are being traded. Like those Persian boxes are multiple thousands of dollars, where if you could have gotten one 20 years ago, I don't know, maybe 400. I don't know what the price increase is, but it actually makes a pretty good case of pottery as an investment, because the prices have gone up so much.
Yeah.
But how do you think about someone like him, that a potter that is quote unquote famous, but that maybe, like you said, might not have the draw that, gets you to pull the trigger to buy those pots?
Yeah. I mean, just because I love the community and the medium so much, I absolutely respect the stature, the fame, and the way people admire the work. So I can absolutely see the value in it. And there's lots of amazing, famous potters that I don't necessarily have in my collection just because it doesn't speak to me, but I can still respect it and appreciate their contribution to the clay, just kind of the lineage and the impact that they've had on other makers and the inspiration that they've provided, or the way that they've taught people in many cases. I don't know if that answered your question. I don't know.
No, I'm just curious with your thoughts about it, because I'm just confused about Michael Simon, because now the person he was and the potter he was is separate than the price of his objects now, and that's completely decoupled in a way that is confusing to me. Because he was always my favorite potter's favorite potter, but for a while there, people my age didn't necessarily even know who he was. Like it almost like skipped a generation. But then once those pots started selling for like a $2,000 plate, dinner plate, then all of a sudden I think maybe he took on a different type of fame.
Yeah.
It was almost like a musician that becomes famous because they're famous.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to switch gears and talk about music, if you're cool with that, because I know
Sure.
That's one of your other great passions. How do you think about concert experiences post-pandemic? Because I've noticed like people want to be in crowds again, and that had stopped for a while. So like, what's your feeling going back to concerts post-pandemic?
For me, it was a lifeline. So I just could not wait for live music to be available in person again. During the pandemic, I was absolutely paying for the online concerts and things like that because I needed to feel that connection, and I missed it so much. And then being able to be back in a room or in a stadium or in whatever venue, there's just something about when an entire crowd is into the music and in that moment together. The energy is unmatched. And it's kind of my church. That is where my soul's fed. So it's really important for me, just for my mental health and being able to express emotions in kind of that way. So, I do not want to be shoulder to shoulder with people anymore. I think that came with age too, is I just like my own personal space. But so post pandemic, I would absolutely prefer a lawn seat than being up in a pavilion shoulder to shoulder with people in seats. But I absolutely also still love a small venue that's cozy and intimate too. But it is all about the energy for me and just being immersed in the moment.
Yeah. Who are you seeing this summer? Are you seeing any big shows or small shows?
What's been really cool, I live like 2 miles from PNC Pavilion. So that's a big venue in Charlotte. And the past 3 years, they've been doing a season lawn pass. For like $250, you get all 30 shows. So
Wow.
I have been to a lot of shows in the last 3 years. I had always gone to a good, 20 shows a season, but it's been excessive the last couple of years. So I've seen people that I never in a million years would have even gone to see because it was included in the pass. And some of those shows, like last year, Foreigner blew me away. Like I knew so much of their music, but I did not know that they were going to be such incredible performers live, and the whole experience was amazing. Longtime Hootie and the Blowfish fan. And Edwin McCain, who I adore, is opening for them this year. So I've bought even better tickets for that. Cage the Elephant is insane live. So I'm excited to see him again this year. I think those are two of the ones that stand out the most, but there's so much music. I could go see Megan Thee Stallion tonight, but it's hot. So I might skip that one. Just the heat is a little insane.
Well, what a benefit to be 2 miles. So can you actually walk to the venue, or do you still have to drive?
It's along a highway, so I would not walk it. I could walk it, but I would not. But yeah, and we saw Snoop Dogg last year. I mean, it's just, the variety has been outstanding. It's been a lot of fun. So
to wrap up, can you plug your Instagram so people could follow and talk if they want to follow up on any of this?
I can. It is pottery.addict, which again is so cringeworthy to me now. I mean, when I picked that name, 6 or 7 years ago, it was because I'm not a maker. I'm not trying to sell any work. I wanted to be anonymous. I didn't want my name attached to it. And so I just kind of tongue in cheek picked Pottery Addict. And it's embarrassing to introduce myself now to people in public meeting for the first time. But at Croy, I was looking at pots, and I heard somebody from across the field say, "Is that Pottery Addict?" And I was like, "Yeah, yes, it is." And so I got to meet, it's been cool to be able to meet a lot of different people that way, but it's still cringy.
Well, thanks so much. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, no, it was fun. I appreciate the invite.
I'd like to thank Christi for coming on the show and also for inviting Mel and I to her home. It was phenomenal to see these pots and to be able to pick them up. I mean, it's essentially like walking into a living museum. We are listener supported, so I'd like to thank today's sponsors. That's the Rosenfield Collection of Functional Ceramic Art, Cornell Studio Supply, and Bray Clay. If you'd like to become a sponsor on the show, you can get in touch at brickyardnetwork.org. I'll be back at the end of August with new episodes, so as always, thanks for tuning in. If you'd like more information on the artists on the show, or if you'd like more information about the workshops and events that I'll be having in the next couple months, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook under Carter Pottery. Another great way to support the show is to leave me a comment on iTunes. To do that, search Tales of a Red Clay Rambler under iTunes Podcasts, and you'll find a page that's linked to our show. Thank you guys for the support.